Aloha everyone and welcome to another Carbon 60 video. I'm your host Kay Elmer, and this video I'd like to share with you my research on the use of C60 in farming. And how I got this idea was I was just reading some random C60 studies. Yeah, I know, I do that. And I came across a study on scientists that had tested C60 supplementation on pigs, and the results were pretty amazing. And so it got me thinking, what else can C60 do in the area of farming that could really be a true game changer in terms of increasing yields and, all the things that farmers seek to try to do with crops and animals, but without using chemicals and without using, techniques like GMO. So really was a really interesting little piece of research that I did, and I wanted to share it with you. For those of you who are interested in how C60 can help your crops, and this could apply to your plants, your garden at home, as well as animals. And not just animals you eat, but animals in general. So I thought I'd just share it with you, and I found it interesting. Thought you would too. So let's jump right in. So the very first thing, and this is just an overall summary, with regards to C60 in use of crops, in agriculture, carbon 60 fullerene is being explored as a potential nanomaterial to enhance plant growth and yield by acting as an antioxidant, just like it does with humans, right? It does the same with plants, now potentially improving the stress tolerance in plants by mitigating the effects of environmental stressors like drought, UV radiation, and extreme temperatures, while also increasing water retention capacity in the soil and potentially boosting nutrient uptake. And this is what the overall summary of the research is. And I've kind of cherry picked some studies to share with you to kind of exemplify what the scientists have discovered in their studies. And the key points, though, that I wanted to point out about crops and C60 is that it has the same antioxidant properties that it does with animals as it does with plants, right? And the key thing here is that it enhances water retention of the plants, which is critical for drought resistance, and also in the uptake of nutrients that the plants were demonstrating, and the ability for the plants to handle stress. And these are all huge pluses, right, if you're a farmer. And so some of the research, and I just cherry picked a few studies to show you. Now, number one is the study, and it's called Innovative Approaches for Improving the Quality and Resilience of Spring Barley Seeds, the role of nanotechnology and phytopathological analysis. Okay, there's a mouthful. Now, what they found out in this study was that they showed that fullerene, C60, and carbon nanotubes increase the water holding capacity, biomass, and yield of plant fruits by 118%. That was the average of the group. And that's 118, that's double. So, can you imagine if you were a farmer and you could double your yield by using C60 in the soil, which is, and then at the end of the day, they concluded, it was an outstanding achievement by nanotechnology in recent years. And there's actually another study that kind of came with this, but it was a little redundant. But the other study that I was reading showed they did it with tomatoes instead of, this was barley seeds. And scientists had done a study on tomatoes, and they had come up with an increased yield of 200%. So it's 3 times the size. Can you imagine a tomato that's 3 times bigger just by using carbon 60? And so that was what the other study's finding. So the bottom line, though, is the interesting thing with this study in this particular area of research was the increase in yields by simply using carbon 60. And carbon 60 is not toxic. It is a natural forming carbon allotrope in nature. So we're trying to, here's an idea where you can use nature to improve nature in the simplest of forms. And I thought this was just really interesting, and how you can increase the size of the fruits that you're creating, the size of your yields in whatever you're growing, by 2 or 3 times as big and or more from every plant that you're putting in the ground. Another study that was called The Effects of Fullerene C60 on the Uptake of Nitrogen and Mineral Elements in Crops Using Synchrotron. The technology they used in the study was they used the synchrotron radiation, micro X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, and they used stable isotope labeling. That's what they did to kind of analyze the idea of nutrient or nitrogen and mineral uptake. And what they discovered in this study was that C60 can improve the uptake of nitrogen and change mineral elements in crops, possibly avoiding damage to soils and the environment caused by the overuse of fertilizers and increasing the yield quantity and quality of crops. And why that's so important, if you understand modern day agriculture, fertilizers are derivatives of oil. and natural gas primarily, and these hydrocarbons go into the soil. There's only three basic elements of fertilizers that are derived from hydrocarbons, and as the plants are grown with these three basic, fertilizers, from hydrocarbons, the plants suck it all up, and after a while, the soil is without additional fertilizer, the soil dies. It just gets depleted because there's really nothing going on except for the fertilizer, and the plants take it all up. Now with carbon 60, they're finding that it can actually prevent that, and instead of using these hydrocarbon type of fertilizers, you can use natural fertilizers plus C60, and you leave the soil healthy. And that's a really important finding, is that C60 protects the soil. Now there is another aspect of this, and I kind of wanted to point out, which was other scientists had looked at the idea of, okay, well, here's the concept, right? What can C60 do for plant yields, plant growth, plant stability? But also these scientists looked at it and said, well, what happens when, what does happen if you put C60 in your soil? Does it end up in the plants, and does it end up in what people eat? And that was the important thing, was what happens after you eat these plants that have this, C60 in the soil. And so what this study demonstrated was, it's called C60 fullerene soil absorption, biodegradation, and plant uptake. Now this study, they looked at that. They looked at specifically what is the plant doing, like how much of the C60 does it pull up into its body, let's say. And so there was little CO2 production in the slits loam, or the sandy loam soil, after 754 days and 328 days, respectively, suggesting high resistance to C60 to mineralization in soil, meaning the plants used the C60, but they didn't really uptake it. And what they measured in the actual plant uptaking C60 into its, I guess they call it, the plant's body, the plant uptake was generally low, with most of the uptake taken carbon accumulating in the roots. So what they found was that a lot of the carbon, the C60, was accumulating up to 40 to 47% of the carbon in the plant was in the roots, right? So that's good. If you don't want people eating the C60, that means it's going to stay in the ground, like all the different kinds of crops that you don't eat the roots, you eat the the yield. And then the smaller amounts were accumulated in the tubers, 22 to 23%. The stems held 12. They found C60 in the stems, 12 to 60%, and they found in the leaves, the carbon 60 was 18 to 22% in the leaves. So what that kind of demonstrated was that the majority of the C60 that the plants are using are not going to be in the fruits or vegetables that you end up eating, right? That's kind of what they found. And then they went on to say, our results indicate that C60 released to the environment will not be highly bioavailable, right? Because it's going to pretty much stay with the parts of the plants that people are not eating, but will likely persist in soil for extended periods, which was what the ultimate game is. You want the C60 to stay in the soil. Unlike hydrocarbon fertilizers, you want the C60 to always be in there working for the next crop that you plant. So that was a really interesting aspect of C60's use in agriculture, was this idea of, okay, what is it, what does the plant uptake, and what does it do to the soil? And so I thought that was real interesting, and I wanted to share that with you. So then when we look at animals, and we look at C60's use with animals in farming, animal husbandry, in the animal husbandry industry, carbon 60 fullerene, C60, is being researched as a potential dietary supplement due to its potential antioxidant properties, with studies showing it may improve meat quality, enhanced animal health by mitigating oxidative stress, and potentially even extend lifespan in some animal models by protecting against cellular damage caused by free radicals. So this is all the stuff you hear when people are trying to sell you C60 oil for your own health. It actually applies to the animals as well. And in a whole different aspect, because we eat those animals as opposed to humans. So the key points with C60's use with animals is that it does have the same antioxidant effects. Scientists have found that it works the same in animals as it does humans. But the interesting thing was that the meat quality improved, the potential lifespan extension is there, which is really critical for, if you think about, you have animals that produce, but if you can get your animals to live longer, they can produce more, right? Whether it's milk or eggs or whatever. And then the other thing too was the delivery method, right? So how how they kind of experimented with the different delivery methods of how to supplement animals with C60. And now the important considerations that the scientists overall discovered was that dosage and toxicity was an issue. Now toxicity, they determined there was no toxicity. The dosage was, they had to experiment, like, how much C60 do you give different animals. The regulatory approach obviously would be a huge deal because you're putting something into the food supply. And then, there's limited research on farm animals. And I'll kind of show you that too. So I cherry picked a few studies to kind of share with you to kind of exemplify these points that were made in the summary. Now, the very first one is the famous C60 rat study in Paris. Now, this was on rats. Obviously, we don't eat rats, or at least Western world people who don't eat rats. But this study though really was quite profound in terms of its findings. And the study's called "The Prolongation of Lifespan of Rats by Repeated Oil Administration of C60 Fullerene." So they fed a bunch of rats with C60, and this is what they discovered when you fed these animals with C60 oil. And the results showed that while olive oil treatment, when they, can lead to an increase of 18% lifespan of treated rats. Let me read that again so you guys understand. Just olive oil can lead to an increase of 18% lifespan of treated rats. Okay, so olive oil right off the bat, longevity hack right there. But C60 oil, olive oil, can increase it up to 90% as compared to the controls. Now, these results confirm the hypothesis according to which this fullerene is active against oxidative stress, but only in soluble form. And then these results strengthen the dose-effect relationship and confirm that C60 is a powerful liver protective agent. And so the key on this study here was that by giving animals C60 in olive oil, in a soluble oil, they lived up to 90% longer. And the thing about it was they were using lab rats that are basically genetically designed to get, to basically develop tumors and then die, quickly, early, so that, you don't want to study to go 10 years, you'd never be able to publish. But so, they're using lab rats that are designed to get cancer and die. And so when they did the pathology on these rats, they lived twice as long, and then when they did the pathology, as the rats continued to die over the extended lifespan, the pathology on various different organs of the rats, specifically the liver, they didn't find any tumors. So a hidden little gem in this study is not only did the rats live longer, the animals lived longer, they lived healthier, and they didn't develop diseases like that they're pre-programmed genetically to develop, which is astounding because, there's all these, one of the biggest issues with animal husbandry, right, is disease. And can you imagine if you had this magic little thing called C60, you could feed your animals so they live longer, and then they're more resilient to diseases. Pretty fascinating. Now, another study here called the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects of liposomal C60 at the cellular, molecular, and whole animal levels. And now this was a study done on beagles, on dogs. So they studied the C60 on dogs, and in summary, a trace amount of the hydrophobic C60 and hydrophilic media effectively produced anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects in cells and animals. And so what they discovered was that the C60, and they used grapeseed oil in this study, but the C60 dissolved in grapeseed oil is a novel anti-inflammatory and antioxidant drug candidate. Meaning they discovered that, for dogs, this was really, really helpful in making them disease resistant because the source of a lot of diseases is inflammation. And by feeding your dogs, or in this case, beagle dogs, or feeding, let's say, your cattle, your sheep, whatever, you're going to basically help them become more disease resistant by having this anti-inflammatory effect. And that's pretty amazing. Now, the last one here is that I found another study called the Dietary Zero-Dimensional Fullerene Supplementation Improves Meat Quality, Lipid Metabolism, Muscle Fiber Characteristics, and Antioxidant Status in Finishing Pigs. Now, this was that study that I mentioned. Now, this was the only study I could find on actual farm animals. But, animals are animals, and we are animals, so this applies to us. But the thing that was really fascinating was they were looking at just basically, meat-producing animals. What happens when you feed them C60? Now, in this study, compared to the control group, dietary C60 supplementation increased the pH 3H and flesh color and marbling scores, and they tended to increase in the C60 group. Okay, so the meat looked better, which is really important if you're going to try to sell something to somebody, right? And then also the results revealed that the dietary C60 supplementation led to a shift of muscle fibers from a type 2B to a type 2A, which means that it caused more tenderness of the meat, thus improving meat quality. Now, there's this other marker that they use in basically, defining the quality of meat. It's called IMF. Sorry, I don't know what that stands for, but IMF is correlated with juiciness and flavor. Now, the present study showed that C60 could increase IMF and SFA content. And this result might be associated with the metabolism of fatty acids in skeletal muscle, including fatty acid biosynthesis, fatty acid oxidation, and lipid transport, which regulates the fat content of skeletal muscle. So for those of you who are familiar with, like the difference between Wagyu beef and regular beef, it's all about marbling. It's all about the fat content. It's all about the muscle fibers and making sure that, that you want the meat to be delicious because it's got a real high fatty content. You want it to be tender. You want it to look nice, because you're trying to sell a product. And this was an amazing study on C60 on pigs that basically turns out that if you feed pigs C60, the quality of the meat, they're going to taste better. They're going to taste better, and it's going to look good, and it's just going to be juicy and flavorful, which really kind of is real interesting because all of you out there that are interested in C60, you're taking C60, so congratulations, you are now tastier than you ever been before in your whole life. But that's the result of the study. So it's really an amazing thing. So in summary, when we look at the use of C60 in farming, it's got some great potential. In crops, water retention, nutrient uptake, stress tolerance, increased yields. In animals, you've got improved health, potential lifespan extension, and the improvement in the meat quality was all demonstrated through these science studies. Now, I do want to leave you with one idea here, and there's a huge challenge, though. And you know it right off the bat. If you're buying C60, and it's the cost effectiveness. So right now, obviously, based on what it costs, there's no way in the world any farmer out there can afford to put C60 in the ground on a regular basis. I mean, just, taking C60 as a supplement as a human is expensive. So I think that while there's the potential is there, the reality check is that right now at this time, 2025, there hasn't been an ability to mass produce C60 for use in agriculture yet. And I think that's going to be my next research project, is to see where do we stand on that ability for science to develop techniques to synthesize C60 from carbon. Most likely they used graphite. They just extract C60 from graphite, and can it be done on such a large scale to reduce the price enough for use in agriculture? So, obviously, this video is just to kind of convey the potential and the incredible benefits that scientists are finding with results to plants and animals. But at the end of the day, until there's a cost effectiveness, in terms of being able to buy C60 in bulk for use in agriculture and with animals, it's not going to actually happen. But the potential is there, and I think that's what's important. Because, who's to say that, let's say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, somebody doesn't come along and find a way to just produce tons of this stuff, C60, and then farmers can start using it in place of this, the chemicals they use, and then you can see some of these incredible results that farmers will have. So this video is really early. But you know what? It does convey the reality that C60 is incredibly beneficial to farming. It's just a matter of time and when it's going to be available at a price where it can be used for farming. And that's the point of the video, is that yes, it's great. It may not be time yet, but hey, you know what? The idea is there. The research is incredible. It's fascinating stuff. And I just wanted to share it with you. I thought you would find it interesting too. So thank you for watching. If you got any questions about C60, join us on Telegram. I have a C60 chat group on Telegram. We talk about all things C60, fluoronols, all the different various carbon allotropes and biohacking. It's a big biohacking thing. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can go to the Tinker's Academy blog, where I post all of my C60 research materials, along with other research that I do and all the different things that I like to do in terms of biohacking. So you like this kind of content? Again, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Appreciate your time. Hope you found this interesting, and have a great day. Aloha.